Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. On this week's podcast, we are going to be talking about how to deal with your taken in hands attitude when they start to argue with you.
Oh, boy. Well, but until we get to that, if you would hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, because you know when you subscribe, it makes me smile.
And if you want to support the channel even further, get more of this kind of content, delve deeper into the subject of domestic discipline, links to ways to do that is down below. Over on Patreon, we have tons of exclusive content over there, and it really is the best place to get those videos.
Absolutely. So we're diving in on something, do I dare call it juicy?
Oh, that might not be the best word to describe our topics. So this subject came up through some conversations I was having with other taken in hands. What is the most productive way to deal with a taken in hand that's just kind of like just giving you an attitude? I don't know how else to say it. Like having an attitude, maybe being argumentative, and they're just kind of like in that moment, they're really in those emotions, they're really in those feelings. Is the best way to deal with that to just punish them right there in that moment to kind of de-escalate the situation? Or could that potentially escalate and be counterproductive?
Actually, no, because I think that's exactly where head of households should take this. And here's the reason. Who knows how this argument started? Maybe it was over the fact that she had already broken a rule and she didn't think she needed to be punished. Maybe it was just over something that was just little that kind of blossomed into this big argument that you didn't even think that it would blow up into that. Whatever the reason is, the fact that she is giving you an attitude in the middle of this argument or this disagreement, to me just communicates a lack of respect in that moment. And that's a punishment. At least for us, it is. That falls into a punishment because she's not supposed to be disrespectful.
But is that something that you should stop mid-argument and punish immediately? Or is that something that you go through the argument, you fix whatever is happening in that argument, you de-escalate, you kind of calm down, and then you come to the punishment later? Like, what is the best approach? And that's kind of what we were talking about. Like, what do we think would work for us? And there was a little bit of a consensus, but I'm going to let Coda kind of speak through what he would do and what he feels like might be the right approach.
Well, the first thing when I say is I think it's very, very appropriate to just stop it at that moment and go ahead and say, hey, we're going out and we're going to have a punishment over this. Here's why. If you wait for the situation to de-escalate, when you now and then you're going to do a punishment, to me, it's just going to re-escalate in a different way. And what I mean by that is it may not re-escalate as anger. It may re-escalate as concern, fear, anxiety, potentially. I mean, these are all things that I think that you're taking in hand could go, wait a minute, I thought we were fine. Now, all of a sudden, because of the way I was acting, now we're going to have a punishment when it seems that all the dust has settled. No. And that's something that she will tell you the Coda of the past probably would have said, yeah, let's de-escalate it, and then we'll work on this situation. No, I think in that moment, when all the dust is churning up and in that moment and you're having that disagreement and she's being disrespectful, the best thing for a couple different reasons. The reason to go straight to a punishment is to first, that shows your leadership and that shows your confidence. Because for you to just say, you know what, stop. We're not arguing about this anymore. We're not talking about it anymore. This has escalated to the point where whether you feel like you broke a rule or not, you've broken one now because you're being disrespectful and I don't like the attitude. We're going right out now and we're going to take care of it. And I don't want to hear any more about it. That's you really taking the lead, cutting it off at the source, cutting the snake off at the head, if you will, so that it's no longer a threat. And then as you go through that punishment, the end of the punishment will help de-escalate everything. And so what you've done is you've taken care of the problem, and you have followed through with holding your taken in hand accountable, all in the same all at the same time, if you will. And you didn't have to compartmentalize everything. You took care of like 2 or 3 problems at once, killed 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will. And then you don't have to de-escalate twice, because that's the other thing. I don't also think that would be okay for your taken in hand. I mean, would you be okay with being de-escalated and then brought up again and then have to de-escalate again? That just also doesn't seem fair to you as a taken in hand.
I agree. And also, I have noticed in the past, because we don't argue a lot. And so it has been a minute since we've had a real argument.
Yeah.
But I've noticed in the past that when you have compartmentalized, when it's like, okay, we're arguing, let's solve the argument, and then we will address behavior. I've noticed that when you don't step up and take that leadership and make that decision in the moment, you tend to lose some of your control of the situation.
Yeah,
You
that's a good
tend
word.
to kind of get into like your emotions about it. You tend to kind of escalate the argument on your side as well. And then it feels really unfair that I'm being punished when maybe you created some of the argument with how you responded to me, instead of just stepping up as the leader and saying, I'm not engaging in this. We're going to go take care of your attitude, and then we'll talk about whatever it is we need to solve here.
No, that's a very, very good point. I think you're exactly right, because what happens is too, I don't know if this happens with any other head of households, but I know the moment that you're talking about. When I do that, or I try to de-escalate it, or I try to go a different direction with it, I can honestly tell you it's weird what happens. I don't even realize that what I've done is that I've lost a little bit of confidence, and I've lost a little bit of confidence because I've taken away on my own some of my own leadership. I have, and that's not anything my taken in hand has done. It's nothing that Aria has done, but by me taking a different route, instead of immediately saying, you know what, no, we're going to punish this. This is actually me thinking rationally. We're just going to stop this at the source right now, right here. By not doing that, you're actually robbing yourself of a little bit of the leadership that you're trying to, exhort between you and your taken in hand. And so, yeah, then all of a sudden you'll get this feeling, and it's a feeling of this lack of confidence. All of a sudden you're back to kind of your old ways, and you go, well, what was that all about? It was because you didn't really take the bull by the horns, if you will, and follow through with that.
Now, I will say that part of this is that you have to have a taken in hand that's willing to submit to these punishments.
That's right.
Mid-argument.
That's right.
Because it can be really hard when you are just really worked up. If your head of household's like, hey, I don't like your attitude, you've crossed a line there, you're going to be punished, let's go. It can be really hard to submit to that.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want to do is put our head of household in the position of having to force punishment or having to force discipline, because then you get into this really like gray area of like, does that cross a line if they're having to force us into that submission? And that's not really fair to them. They should never have to force us into submission. It should be something that we offer. And if we're not ready to offer it, I think that it is very appropriate to use something like corner time in that situation to say, this is like, we're putting a pause on the argument. We're not going any further with this. You are not allowed to say another word. And if you're not ready to submit to your discipline right now because you did cross a line, go to the corner for a while until you're ready to take your punishment, so that then we can finish the discussion. Always go back. Mm-hmm. Always go back, because the original issue that was causing the argument in the first place, it didn't go away.
Right. Yeah, right. It didn't go away.
But you need your taken in hand to be able to be respectful and to be able to communicate well. And if they are crossing a line, if they've earned that punishment, it is, in my opinion, better to take care of that so that you can have a productive conversation.
Mhm.
Because if they're worked up and they have like crossed that line and they feel emboldened to continue to communicate in an inappropriate way, that conversation's not going to be productive anyway.
Mm-mm.
So it really is your job as a head of household to recognize, hey, this is going completely off the rails. I'm putting a pause on this conversation because it's not productive anymore. We're going to deal with the disciplinary action, and then we'll come back to this when we can be more productive.
Yeah, and I love what you said earlier, and that was absolutely the right thing to say. We've always talked about in a domestic discipline relationship that you're taken in hands due to a certain extent have to agree what they're going to submit to. And so if that's not something that you've talked about, I mean, this is another reason we're doing a podcast on this today. This is something, if you've never talked to your taken in hand about it, have this conversation, because if you haven't had an argument like this yet, you're going to. And you need to know, head of households, you need to know taken in hands, what's going to happen if we have that. So she needs to know, okay, if it gets to this point, I potentially need to know, oh shoot, I'm going to have a punishment now. And head of households, you need to know, hey, I know she knows if we get to this point, that's it. We're going and we're doing that. But you got to have that conversation.
Because it's all about teaching your taken in hand what is and is not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And if you allow conversations to turn into arguments that get to go on forever, like, I mean, we've had some arguments in the past pre-domestic discipline.
No, we never had any. No.
But they would go for hours and hours because it
gosh.
wasn't productive, and we were
Yes.
both getting into our feelings, and we were just not communicating well.
Yeah.
And if you let that happen, then you are teaching your taken in hand that it's okay for that to happen.
Yeah.
Where if you step in and say, no, this is not the way we communicate with each other, and because you did that, because you crossed that line, you will face a consequence, you will face punishment. And when you do that mid-argument, you're teaching them exactly where that line is so that they can learn not to cross it in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly
If you
right.
continue to let them cross it and then be punished afterwards, you're not actually training the behavior in the moment that you need for them to develop.
We've talked about this before on many podcasts, but it's worth saying again. Everything that you're doing is training in good or bad habits, depending on what you allow to go on or what you guys have talked about letting go on. That is all going to depend on what you've talked about, what you've had a dialogue about, what you've agreed to, what are the rules that you've set up, all the different things. And so, but you need to always constantly be asking yourself in any of these situations, are we cultivating the right habits that we want, or are we allowing bad habits to form? And this is a perfect example of having a conversation so that a bad habit doesn't form. You want to form the good habits, because that is the whole reason of domestic discipline, is figuring out a structure that will form good habits in your relationship so you can enjoy your relationship more, because that's the whole point behind this.
And I think that it's important to note that disagreements are not wrong.
What?
Disagreements.
But you're right.
Yeah, disagreements are going to happen. Like, you're not always going to agree on everything. You, as a taken in hand, you don't have to blindly just follow and submit to every word your head of household has without question.
Right.
You are allowed to bring concerns, to bring questions, and to just downright disagree with what they're doing, right? It's how you go about bringing that to them and how you are able to articulate yourself and communicate in those moments. Obviously, the standards of what that looks like will be slightly different depending on who you are, who your head of household is, how your relationship functions. And those are things that you're going to have to really develop within your own relationship. But I think we can all agree that getting angry and being argumentative and using inappropriate tones, those are all things that are disrespectful, and respect is kind of a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so whenever you cross that line into becoming disrespectful, that's when you have to realize that whether or not that is a pattern of how you've behaved in the past, or whether or not that's just how you are, that's not how you want to be.
That's good.
That's not indicative of the goals of your relationship. And so sometimes it's good to shed those bad habits and to shed those old traits in order to step into who you want to be, and in order to honor your head of household and to develop the relationship that you want. Shed those bad habits. And the best way to do that is for your head of household to step in and say, this is what is and is not acceptable. And as soon as you cross over into what is not acceptable, you're going to hear about it and you're going to have the consequences for it.
Because head of households, that's what we've talked about before. That's your job. Your job is, yes, to lead for all these different reasons. But the reason she's asked you to lead is she wants to be a better person. She wants to be a better wife. She wants to be a better taken in hand. So by you not addressing this, by you not following through with that and allowing her to get away with bad habits, this is something that took me forever to understand. By not following through, I'm actually not doing right by her. I'm actually making it worse for her. I'm allowing her to follow and make the bad habits, make them more ingrained, make it worse than what she's already asked me to do, which is to help her get rid of those bad habits and make better habits so that she can be a better taken in hand, be a better wife, be a better person. And that is what you always have to keep in mind, is that you're doing this for her benefit.
And that really is the goal at the end of all of this, is that you want to develop character qualities that just show the best of who you are and show the best of who your taken in hand is. And so you don't want to allow emotions to dictate behavior. You really want to get more into being logical and being able to control your behavior with what you know is right versus how you feel in that moment. I can tell you that some of my worst punishments have come from me basically feeling justified in my feelings and not allowing my logical responses of what I know is right to dictate my behavior, but really to just feel justified in my feelings. And when my head of household steps in and says, I am not going to let you justify how you are talking to me or how you are behaving towards me or the decisions that you made, I'm not going to allow your feelings to let you feel justified. I'm stepping in to say, you're absolutely unjustified in that response, and you're going to have some consequences because that is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate that from you. And by doing that, he really is helping me develop into who I want to be, who he knows I can be, and that makes me a better person. That makes me a more functional person. And it makes me a better reflection of him and his leadership as well.
And that's the whole point, really, of where we're going with this scenario, is that in this moment, these are all the decisions that you want to have already previously made. And head of households, that is exactly why everything that we just talked about, that's exactly why in that moment when stuff is happening, cut it off at the source and say, no, we're not going to de-escalate this. We're going to have a punishment now, because it could be the very reason you're in this argument is you let it escalate to that point anyway, and maybe you shouldn't have. And so that's the other thing that I wanted to say is yes, maybe you missed that moment, but don't miss it again, because then you're at the third moment, which is the 3 strikes you're out, and that's worse. And so the first thing is you probably don't even want it to escalate to that point. You want to cut it off before that happens. But if it's gotten to that point, own up to yourself inside, okay, it shouldn't have got to this point, but now I'm going to do the right thing and cut it off, because it's not doing your relationship, any argument is not doing your relationship any good, period.
Well, and I was going to say, Coda in the past has told me where, he can tell I'm kind of getting a little in my feelings. He has said, you need to watch yourself because you're getting dangerously close to crossing a line. That is his kindness to give me that warning, to let me know, like, I can tell where you are headed, and I don't want to have to step in here. But if you keep going down this road, that's exactly what's going to happen. And so it's good to recognize that and to be able to give your take it in hand the choice, basically, because then if they choose to continue to escalate, then there's absolutely no question that what should happen next.
True.
But also sometimes, and I hate to admit this, again, we haven't argued in a long time.
We really haven't.
This happened a long time ago. But there have been times where an argument is escalating. Coda hasn't stepped in to stop it. So I feel like, oh, he thinks that's acceptable. And so I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Not intentionally, but almost to see, how far can I push this? How much is he willing to accept from me? And I don't know very many taken in hands that would do that on purpose or do that as a conscious thought. But subconsciously, your taken in hand is trying to see, how much can they get away with? How far can they push you? What is your limit? And until you step in and say, that's it, and really give them the punishment that they've earned in that moment, because I don't know about you, but I think that being intentionally disrespectful and being argumentative is intentionally disrespectful. Sorry to tell you. Sorry if you don't like hearing that, but it is. Being intentionally disrespectful is one of the worst things that you can do, and probably one of the harshest punishments that you should receive.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of piggyback on everything that Ari has been saying is, for both of you, feelings aren't necessarily bad. However, one of the things that I've really even tried to teach our daughter as she's getting older is that if you're led by your feelings, that's when it becomes wrong. The mind must always control the feelings. Feelings aren't bad, because as human beings, that's what separates us from a lot of the animals, right? And some other things. Not that animals don't have feelings, but you get what I'm saying, is that that's what really defines us as people. What's wrong is when we are led by our feelings. And we can look around and see a lot of people who are led by their feelings rather than their mind. The point is to feel them, acknowledge them, but then let the mind win out over those feelings. And so the reason I bring that up as head of households, that's what you're doing. When you're cutting this off and saying, we're going for a punishment now, what you're saying is look, we're not living in our feelings anymore right now. It's gotten to this point because we're both letting our feelings rule out. No, my head's telling me, let's cut this off at the source. Let's do this punishment so we can resolve whatever the problem is and get back to what the fundamental part of our relationship is, which is, this is not okay. This is not what we should be doing. And that's what you're doing, is you're letting the logic of it all win out over the feelings.
And you have to ask yourself, do you want your taken in hand to be self-controlled?
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
Because that is really what it comes down to, is when we're having hard conversations, when we're talking about hard things that can easily turn into arguments, the difference between it being a productive conversation and it turning into an argument is self-control.
That's right.
And a lack of self-control is what turns it into an argument. And so if you want your taken in hand to develop that self-control, to be able to control how they're speaking to you, how they're expressing themselves, how they're allowing their feelings to play into the conversation, you have to require it. You have to facilitate the development of their self-control by stepping in and offering that accountability.
Well said. I was going to say, I don't really have anything to add there.
Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that we were able to kind of suss through this topic a little bit in a
Yeah.
way that you found valuable.
Hopefully.
Let us know what you think down below. We really do enjoy reading your comments, and give this video a like if you liked the conversation.
Absolutely.
Anyway, guys, we'll talk to you next week.
See you later.